Good evening. It's Thursday, April 14, 2022. Market Headlines is ready to provide you information from business and economic. And with me, Fajar Wayong, you're watching Market Headlines. After Gotoh has finished holding an IPO, the Indonesia Stock Exchange is optimistic that many other technology companies will follow Gotoh's steps. At the same time, the Indonesia Stock Exchange continues to encourage companies from various industries to take advantage of the capital market as a house of growth. As of April 11, 2022, the Indonesia Stock Exchange noted that there were 30 companies in the IDX stock listing pipeline. There are 15 prospective issuers, which are large-scale asset companies or above 250 billion rupiah. After Gojek Tokopedia or Gotoh has finished holding an initial public offering, the Indonesia Stock Exchange is optimistic that in the future, many other technology companies will follow Gotoh's steps. Igede Nyomanyetna, Director of Corporate Valuation at the Indonesia Stock Exchange, say that Indonesia is the largest unicorn-producing country in Southeast Asia. Nyoman added, Indonesia still has enormous potential to give birth to the next unicorns. Currently, there are dozens of centaurs who are ready to become unicorns, or the current term, Sunicorn. Therefore, the Indonesia Stock Exchange continues to encourage companies from various industries, including companies in the technology sector, to take advantage of the capital market as a house of growth by conducting IPO and listing socialization either on a one-on-one basis or through workshops. Meanwhile, equity analyst Kanakahita Solvera William Wibowo sees IPO actions by companies with large assets to the stock exchange will strengthen the company's performance in facing the trend of uncertainty in the future. IDX Channel reports. And to find out how to measure readiness before carrying out an IPO, let's discuss it with Jasmine Maranan, PwC Indonesia Capital Markets Leader. Hello, good evening, Jasmine.
Good evening, Fajar. Good evening, everyone.
Okay. I'll talk about measuring readiness to conduct IPO and to become a public company. I will start it from Gotoh IPO. It's one of our biggest company in Indonesia, especially in digital, or maybe a unicorn. We can say it as unicorn. How do you see Gotoh IPO back to that day?
Well, it's a phenomenal listing. It's the first decacorn to actually list in the Indonesian markets. It raised a whopping US $1.1 billion in the Indonesian markets alone. And therefore, this shows the strength of the Indonesian market amidst the pressures or the headwinds. We're talking about inflationary pressures. We're talking about the uncertainty of the economic growth amidst the pandemic. But here we have Gotoh being able to raise $1.1 billion in our markets. And therefore, my hope is that there would be more companies to list in our exchange from today until the end of the year and even beyond.
Okay, so you think that there are still many companies showing interest to conduct an IPO amid these uncertainties, geopolitical tensions, and the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic?
Absolutely, Fajar. Yes, I think there is pent-up demand. You remember at the height of the pandemic in 2020, several companies have actually pushed back or postponed their IPO plans. So amidst the headwinds, there is some kind of positive investor sentiment brought about by the successful listing of Gotoh. And even before that, if you will remember, the second half of 2021, we have actually witnessed 3 large IPOs. One is Bukalapak raising $1.5 billion, and it was followed by Mitratel as well as Avian. So this really shows strong confidence in our public markets, and as a partner in our firm, PwC, we have been talking to a number of companies who are very much interested, and these are companies in various sectors, and most of them are really more on the emerging and innovative sectors.
Okay, and we hope, of course, it will grow from time to time, the number of companies to conduct an IPO. But is there any specific category of company to carry out an IPO, or maybe it might come from various industries to conduct an IPO, and there is no specific industry?
Good question, Fajar. For me, a company that meets the eligibility requirements can list on the IDX. So any company in any sector can actually list on the IDX. The IDX has 3 boards. First is the main board, which actually attracts the larger companies that have more established operating history. And you also have the development board and the acceleration board, which caters to medium-sized and small-sized companies that have been operating for less than 3 years. And then, as we have also seen, there's a new updated rules issued by the IDX, where they have actually added some financial requirements in order to attract more listings. And just what GoTo did, there is a rule that allows certain companies with dual class share structure to actually list. So if I can actually expand a little bit on the dual class share structure, this is a framework that has been existing in the US, in Hong Kong, and Singapore. And now that Indonesia has fully embraced this concept, IDX is genuinely resolved to increase its market capitalization, especially attracting more companies, specifically on the innovative, or what you call new economy sectors or technology sectors, which is really something that we can compete with regionally and globally.
So in other words, we are open for all kind of companies, for all industries, for all size to hold an IPO and become a public listed company. But is there a certain time to conduct an IPO, Jasmine, or maybe it's free, it's up to the company of the first quarter, the second quarter, or how to determine the right time to IPO?
Yeah, that's actually the first question that every company that aspires to IPO. What is the right timing? Well, I can tell you that the market is stable as we speak today, now. Yet we face so much uncertainties now more than ever. So if you ask me, before the pandemic, I have observed that the Q2 and Q4 are actually peak windows for IPO launches. But with all these uncertainties surrounding us, that timing is no longer the case. It is harder to predict. However, what we can do is that the companies would just have to prepare and get their house in order, and also act like a public company, so that when the market is conducive, and because the IPO market can open and close immediately, a company who is well prepared to launch can really launch when the market is conducive.
So when the market is conducive is, I underline that word. So it can be vary in the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, but the market must be conducive. But how long does it take for a company to become a listed company on the IDX, Jasmine? And how is the process to become a publicly listed company?
All right. In terms of the timing, from the time the company submits its registration statement to the OJK, it approximately takes about 3 to 4 months, give or take, until the company successfully rings the bell on the IDX floor. But before the registration statement submission to OJK, the IPO preparation for companies could vary depending on the size of the business, the complexity of the business, as well as the maturity of the organization. How mature is the people? How mature is their systems and processes? So in my line of expertise and having done capital market transactions for the last 2 decades, I would say that the IPO preparation could generally take between 12 to 24 months.
Okay, we got it. That's the first stage to prepare an IPO. At least we know that how long does it take, the IPO process. It's getting more interesting, Jasmine, but we'll continue the discussion on the next segment. And viewers, Market Headlines will be right back after the break.
Kini, aplikasi mClears hadir di handphone Anda untuk memudahkan transaksi Anda. Informasi aktivitas clearing dan penjaminan tidak lagi hanya dapat diakses melalui komputer di kantor Anda, melainkan dapat diakses di mana saja dan kapan saja dalam genggaman Anda. Fitur-fitur mClears. Equity clearing dan settlement adalah fitur di mana Anda dapat melihat posisi kewajiban settlement anggota clearing hingga nilai alternate case settlement serta informasi gagal bayar. Risk management adalah fitur di mana Anda dapat melihat posisi trading limit, kolateral, MKBD, portofolio harian, risk charge anggota clearing dan kombinasi, serta nilai minimum cash collateral. Derivatif adalah fitur di mana Anda dapat melihat posisi trading limit, margin call, dan informasi clearing derivatif. Terkait pinjam-meminjam efek, terdapat fitur mengenai borrowing information dan lendable pool information, serta lending revenue dan borrowing fee. Serta menu lain yang menampilkan informasi mengenai haircut, risk charge saham, dan nilai harga penyelesaian harian dan harga penyelesaian final. Selain itu, Anda juga dapat mengakses fitur pengumuman, peraturan, dan informasi layanan KPEI pada aplikasi mClears. Download aplikasi mClears di App Store atau Google Play Store. Lakukan registrasi user Anda dengan menggunakan alamat email berdomain resmi yang sesuai dengan anggota clearing Anda. Setelah registrasi, Anda akan diberikan kode OTP di email Anda untuk verifikasi. Dan aplikasi mClears Anda siap untuk digunakan. Anda dapat mengakses seluruh menu pada aplikasi mClears dengan melakukan aktivasi berlangganan premium yang dapat dilakukan dengan memilih menu Get Premium. Download aplikasinya sekarang, lakukan registrasi, dan dapatkan kemudahan dalam genggaman tangan Anda. Kemudahan informasi KPEI dalam genggaman Anda.
You're watching Market Headlines, and before we continue the discussion on measuring readiness to become a public company through IPO, I will ask you to see some information and data from our infographics. The first graphic is about fund raised from the IPO. In 2017, 9.55 trillion rupiah, 2018, 15.66 trillion rupiah, 2019, 14.77 trillion rupiah, and 2020, we know that the pandemic started and the fund raised from the IPO only 5.5 trillion rupiah. And then in the next year, 2021, it shoot up to 62.6 trillion rupiah. And the second infographics is about issuers with the largest IPO proceeds. The first one is Bukalapak with 21.9 trillion rupiah. And then Mitratel, 18.79 trillion rupiah, and the latest public company, Goto, with 13.7 trillion rupiah, and Adaro Energy, 12.24 trillion rupiah, and Indofood CBP, 6.29 trillion rupiah. And what are the key success factors of IPO? The data is taken from PwC Indonesia. The first one is tone at the top, and the second is transparency. The third one is project management, systems and processes, and realistic timeline, and of course, resource management. And let's continue the discussion with Jasmine Maranan, PwC Indonesia Capital Markets Leader. Jasmine, let's continue. My last questions for you is, what needs to be prepared by the company in the first stage of holding an IPO?
All right. there are numerous things to prepare, right? An IPO involves the transformation of the entire organization. And so the first things that the owners and the top executives would want to think about is, why do I want to go public? The next thing would be to look at the organization structure of the company. So you would think about, if you are a single company, then that's very easy. But if you are a big group of companies, such as Goto or Adaro or Bukalapak, you would be thinking about, would you be listing one of the operating companies or subsidiaries? Or would you be listing the holding company? Or would you actually be listing would you actually establish a new company to actually list? And so there's a lot of things to consider in terms of trying to find the most optimal structure. And to find a most optimal structure, you would be looking at various considerations: the legal, tax, commercial perspectives, as well as the accounting implication of any restructuring or reorganization to achieve the intended IPO structure. And then you move on by looking and reviewing at the entire organization. Is your accounting and financial reporting process and systems ready? Do you have the right corporate governance structure in place as well? Does the information systems as well as the technology, can they actually support the IPO as well as the growth that the company will take as soon as it's listed and continue to scale its growth? So these are just some of the areas that need to be prepared prior to hitting the button in order to launch an IPO.
Okay, numerous things needs to be prepared from organization structure and growth of the company itself, and how the technology can support the intention of the company to conduct an IPO. But from financial perspective, is there any specific requirement? For example, do each companies that want to conduct an IPO must consistently record profit from time to time?
Right, I get the question. Okay, so to be eligible to list on the main and development boards, there are actually various criteria that a company could qualify in if it's not yet profitable. So the IDX has actually expanded the financial requirement criteria by considering revenue, assets, and market capitalization thresholds, right? So it's not just profit anymore. There are still other criteria, and that's what Goto has actually been able to use, given their size and revenue. An important point that I'd like to share, however, here, Fajar, is that in a period of market volatility, growth is the key. So companies that show very good growth in terms of its top line, or if it really is profitable already and produces healthy cash flows, these are kind of the strong fundamentals that have proven to withstand market disruptions.
Okay, we need to make it bold and highlight growth is the key, and it can maybe a more perspective for investors that if we can see the growth and it's proven, and it can be a consideration for investors maybe to take a part from the IPO. So numerous things and several things I think needs to be prepared, and I think many companies out there are really intended to conduct an IPO, but they are maybe many considerations in their heads, in their management. Maybe they need some help. So what is the role of PwC Indonesia in assisting companies that maybe have intentions to conduct an IPO?
Thanks for asking that question. So PwC, our firm, we have all the service offerings that a company needs before they conduct the IPO, during, and even after the IPO. So what does that mean? We can actually act as the company's independent auditors, or we can also be assisting and acting as the financial advisors. Additionally, we also carry out IPO readiness reviews or diagnostic assessment, which is the first crucial step in preparing for the IPO. Our IPO readiness assessment, or what you call sometimes IPO diagnostic, it is a cross-functional review, a holistic review of the entire organization, and this provides companies a roadmap for their IPO. What this provides is that it gives the top executives a bird's eye view of the entire organization, where they are, and they will be able to see what gaps need to be remediated in order to avoid last-minute surprises and roadblocks that could derail the IPO timetable.
Okay, so PwC will assist the company from the first stage until they successfully conducted IPO.
Absolutely.
So what are the main indicators of a successful IPO itself?
Well, you have projected on the screen earlier. I would probably name three. There needs to be a tone at the top.
Okay,
so what does that mean?
That
means that the leadership should be aligned around the project vision or the vision of the IPO and the value. And this should be communicated and resonates throughout the entire organization because, as I had mentioned, IPO is a transformation of the entire organization. Number two success factor is to be able to come up with a realistic timeline. What does that mean? It means that there should be a clear understanding of all the tasks and even the codependencies, because Fajar, there are so many tasks, really daunting. But the company and its people should need to understand that task 1 may be related to task 5, and therefore those who are actually working on those tasks should be actually working together every step of the way.
Okay.
Number 3, and this is really very important, right? An IPO is a monumental task. It is a milestone. It's actually a journey. So what is important is that there must be a good, or as I would say, solid, excellent project and resource management.
Okay.
What does that mean? Simple.
Yeah.
It's having the right people at the right time, doing the right activities. So those are my top 3.
Okay. Okay, we will continue the point of view from the key vectors of successful IPO in the next segment, Jasmine. So viewers, stay with us. Market Headlines will be back after the break.
Meniti langkah kemenangan di bulan Ramadan. Saksikan program-program pilihan yang menginspirasi di bulan Ramadan. Kids Menu. Program masak-memasak menyajikan menu spesial tapi mudah untuk dibuat. Cocok untuk kegiatan di dapur bersama buah hati. Small Space. Ide pemanfaatan ruang minimalis menjadi tempat usaha yang nyaman beserta tips untuk memulai usaha. Quran Inspiration. Belajar bagaimana Al-Quran mempengaruhi kehidupan dari sudut pandang seorang public figure. Today Special. Mencicipi menu dari restoran dan hotel terkenal, mengintip langsung cara pembuatan serta tips memasak dari chef profesional. Saksikan program-program inspirasi Ramadan hanya di IDX Channel.
Eropa kompak bergerak positif.
Awali hari Anda dengan informasi dunia ekonomi yang diulas dari berbagai sudut pandang.
Level tertinggi
Power Breakfast, Senin sampai Jumat, jam 8.30, hanya di IDX Channel. Perbincangan hangat tentang isu dan kebijakan ekonomi terkini yang diulas secara mendalam, bersama narasumber terpercaya. Market Review, Senin sampai Jumat, jam 10 waktu Indonesia bagian Barat, hanya di IDX Channel.
Melalui Bursa Efek Indonesia adalah lompatan besar menuju transformasi pertumbuhan perusahaan. Bergabunglah dengan ratusan perusahaan yang telah berkembang pesat dengan Go Public. Go Public, lebih baik.
Welcome back on Market Headlines, and we're still in the middle of discussion with Jasmine Maranan, PwC Indonesia Capital Markets Leader, in discussing measuring readiness to become a public company through IPO. Jasmine, maybe this is the last questions for this interview session. What are the benefits for the company that has successfully conducted IPO, and is there any obligation for those companies that have conducted IPO?
Yes, there are many or numerous advantages to becoming a public company. A public company, once listed, can easily access the capital markets in order to finance its growth and expansion. And its listed shares, because it's listed, it can function as a currency for their mergers and acquisition. Also, it is perceived that listed companies have better brand recognition and also prestige with their consumers. It also helps in actually attracting and retaining good talent within the company. Now, another incentive is that once listed, provided that the company meets certain criteria, there will be a reduction of 3% in its corporate income tax rate, assuming they, of course, meet those criteria. So there's a lot of advantages. And to your second question, once listed, yes, they have post-listing obligation. They need to submit periodic reports to the IDX. They have to submit annual reports, annual financial statements, as well as quarterly financial statements. They also have an obligation to actually report material transactions within 2 days from the occurrence of such events. There are other listing obligations once you have listed, and a complete understanding of these post-listing obligation upfront is actually critical so that there will be no surprises. If, for example, a company is not able to meet its submission of financial statements, it could actually potentially be damaging to the reputation of the company and could potentially hurt the share price. So it's really crucial to understand what these all means and what needs to be done.
So, of course, there are many advantages for becoming a public company, but at the same time, obligations are waiting to do after the IPO, because there is no easy journey for a company to be a public listed and after the IPO, and then they can freely to do, but good governance is still the main point for every public company after the IPO. And Jasmine, our time is up for this interview session. Maybe we can continue our discussion in the next time, in the next session. Thank you very much for sharing and joining us this evening. Good luck.
Thank you very much, and see you next time.
See you next time. And viewers, that's all for Market Headlines today. And please enjoy our next program on IDX Channel, your trustworthy economic, business, and capital market channel. I'm Fajar Wayong. Have a nice evening and stay safe.